Started. Okay. Not at all. Sure. Do I have time to go over to the high speed rail? I have a transportation.
It's great. Yeah, I got to sit with your VP. Wonderful guy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the chair has given me the opportunity to cover a few things about the remainder of the day before we begin strategic planning. So I just wanted to update you on the plans for the rest of the day. Of course, the remainder of the day has been, in a very good way, complicated by virtue of the fact that this afternoon, as you all probably know by now, Governor Christ will be joining us. So I wanted to lay out the day's activities as best we can, knowing that any governor's arrival is always subject to alteration one way or the other on schedule. But what we propose is the following, that at the conclusion of the last committee meeting, which is scheduled to run for an hour and change, at the conclusion of that meeting we would break. And we would begin lunch, which will be served in the room just behind us, in advance of coming back to begin the regular meeting of the Board of Governors. It is our intention to withhold or ask the chair if we could adjust the agenda and place the legislative budget request at the end of the regularly scheduled meeting and go forward with as much of the regular meeting as we can get in before the arrival of the governor. This room will have to be vacated for a brief period of time just for some adjustments for presentation following his arrival. Then we would reconvene for his comments as a group, and then following his departure, reconvene as a full board for purposes then of taking up the final committee, which would include the legislative budget request. So we're trying to stay on schedule best we can and feel as though making those adjustments would help us to do that. The alternative was to wait until the governor's departure to begin the regularly scheduled meeting, but we know that people have flights and transportation schedules, etc., and we didn't want to run too long today. So quickly again, we will begin momentarily the Strategic Planning Committee meeting. Followed by that, we will break. Lunch will be served, and we will look at the clock and try to make a decision as to what the best time is to come back from lunch. We would begin the regularly scheduled Board of Governors meeting, get as much of that work accomplished as we can, adjusting and saving the legislative budget request portion of that program for after the governor's arrival and then departure, reconvene, finish the meeting, and call it a day. So I realize we're asking everybody to be very flexible with us, and we appreciate it very much, but we are looking forward to having the governor with us, and hope you understand that that means accommodating the schedule best we can. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Okay. At this point, we would call the Strategic Planning and Academic System Oversight Committee to order. Mike, can you call the roll?
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Duncan.
Present.
Mr. Edwards.
Present.
Dr. Marshall.
Here.
Ms. McDevitt. Ms. Parker. They are in the room behind me. Mr. Perez.
Here.
Commissioner Smith. Dr. Solano.
Here.
Mr. Stavros.
Here.
Mr. Temple. Mr. Tripp. He's here. Dr. Zachariah. And he's also here. Chair Martin, you have a quorum.
Smith here, too.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. The minutes were included in the packet. The chair would entertain a motion for the minutes.
Second.
So moved and second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We now move to academic programs, and we'll have Governor Stan Marshall to give us an update and talk about a couple of key items. Dr. Marshall.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, there are two items we need to deal with. The first of those, item 3A, that's a request from the University of Florida for limited access status for the Bachelor of Science in Sustainability and the Built Environment. A simple definition of sustainability is the capacity to endure, just to endure. Sustainability has become a wide-ranging term in various academic disciplines to describe interdisciplinary study of natural and man-made factors that either threaten or enhance the capacity of an ecosystem or community to endure. Offered within the College of Design, Construction, and Planning, the program will prepare students to seek sustainable solutions to problems in the built environment. Graduates are expected to become employed in positions with regulatory agencies, building design and construction firms, organizations and companies engaged in environmental recovery, and emerging green industries. This request, Mr. Chairman, is being made primarily due to limited design studio space. In addition, faculty resources are scarce, with one half of a faculty line dedicated to this interdisciplinary program and the remainder of the course requirements being met through the efforts of existing faculty in other programs in the college. Enrollment will be limited to 30 students, and a certain number of those seats will be reserved for Florida college transfer students under our statewide 2+2 articulation agreement. So, Mr. Chairman, I move approval for the University of Florida Bachelor of Science in Sustainability and the Built Environment to be a limited access program.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Question?
This is a bachelor's program, right?
That's right.
Why do we have to approve it? Because it's limited access, is that?
Yes.
Can somebody explain that to me?
Yes, Governor
Dr. Harris.
Tipple.
We don't normally approve bachelor's programs, right?
You're not actually being asked to approve the baccalaureate program itself. It is the limited access status that must come before this board.
It's a bachelor's program, but it's a very specialized one.
Any other questions? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the other item is public notice of intent to the Board of Governors Regulation 7.005, residency for tuition purposes. Excuse me. Item 3B is to approve public notice of intent to amend existing Board of Governors Regulation 7.005, residency for tuition purposes. The regulation has been substantially revised to conform changes made to Florida statutes during the 2009 legislative session. It has also been reorganized so that the requirements for initial residency determination are clearly delineated from residency reclassification. The amended regulation has been reviewed by the Council for Academic Vice Presidents, the Council of Student Affairs, the Admission Directors and Registrars Committee, and the University General Councils. So, Mr. Chairman, I move approval for public notice of intent to amend existing Board of Governors Regulation 7.005, residency for tuition purposes.
It's been moved, and we also have a second. Are there any questions? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. We now move to item number 4, the State University System 2009 Annual Report. Each of you received a copy of Volume 1 of the SUS 2009 Annual Report, as well as the economic link to Volume 2, which includes the detailed data tables that support the dashboards and the narratives in Volume 1. We want to thank the many staff throughout the system that have worked very, very hard to get us to the point where we are today. I think we have a very strong foundation for baseline data in which we will build upon for the Planning and Performance Accountability System. And at this point, I'd like to ask Dr. Donna Menier to give us a report. And let me just again reiterate the cooperation that we've had from all the universities, the provosts. They've had a number of conference calls, many of which I sat in on personally because I wanted to see the progress. And they've done a great job along with the Board of Governors staff. Dr. Menier.
Thank you, sir. Want to pause a little bit this morning and actually reiterate a little bit of how we are progressing on the entire comprehensive planning and performance monitoring system, not only for you as board members and members of our on-site audience, but also for members of our virtual audience, just to bring everyone up to speed on how this is coming together. We do want to touch on the contents of the annual report and to review where it fits into the greater planning and performance accountability process, as well as taking a look at our schedule for the upcoming year. And then want to kind of focus in on some of the policy decisions that you're going to be asked to make in the coming months, for which we really hope the information we're providing through the annual report will provide you with the kind of information you need to be able to make truly informed decisions. Our goal, obviously, all along has been to design a much less redundant approach to data gathering and to reporting, to make sure that you as board members have the key pieces of information that you need to inform your strategic planning, your budgeting decisions, and other policy decisions for the state university system. The procedures are going to include, as you will remember, a multi-year university work planning process, as well as the annual reports that really focus in on each institution's unique mission, that focus in on their core strengths, and that identify performance targets and report on progress within the context of both institutional and system-wide goals. The development of this system, as long as we make sure that we do a really effective job on it, is going to help us ensure that the state university system goals and efforts are aligned with statewide needs, and that we take full advantage of the unique attributes of each one of the institutions in our system. The process is going to include reporting on system-wide and institutional progress toward those goals, and will provide you with the information to guide key policy decisions around specific issues. Also, we're very aware that a solid accountability process is going to help demonstrate to the taxpayers and their elected representatives how well the state university system is meeting its goals and document the return on investment of public funds. We also will be able to monitor performance changes over time depending on how much public funding is actually provided. One of the real benefits that should come out of this endeavor is the reporting of data in a more consistent manner across institutions and over time. What we've tried to do is really come up with a common approach for performance reporting and the actual presentation of data, so that you and others get more used to seeing the information in a particular format, and we can get more comfortable with monitoring how we're actually moving forward on various metrics. I think it's also going to serve as an excellent orientation tool for new board members, new trustees, new presidents, new legislators, new staff, and such. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have changes over time. We've made a commitment as staff, and in working with Governor Martin and with you and with our staff throughout the system, on a commitment to continuous improvement. We'll continue to refine the process as we move forward, but we didn't want to, as we often say, waiting on perfection to stand in the way of progress. This annual report that's been provided to you is the first installment in the broader planning and performance monitoring process. Because of the cyclic nature of planning, budgeting, and accountability activities, we obviously had to start somewhere. So what we really did was focus in on identifying the baseline data on where we stand on a variety of very key metrics, specifically those metrics aligned with your strategic plan for the state university system, as well as some additional metrics that have been identified by the legislature in relationship to particular statutory requirements regarding tuition differential, centers of excellence, and commercialization access grants. Today, you will be asked to consider approving the draft of the 2009 annual report. We do have a couple of technical changes to make before we go into final production. With your approval, then the document will be submitted to the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the President of the Senate. This spring, as you follow the cycle on around, the institutions will begin to develop their work plans that build on their unique institutional personalities and their unique strengths, that outline their vision for the next 5 to 10 years, including more immediate university priorities and plans for achieving those priorities, and that also focus on how each institution is going to contribute to the attainment of the system-wide goals that you've laid out. So we'll be talking about specific targets on those metrics. Proposed enrollments and the tuition differential proposals, as mentioned in yesterday's Budget Committee, will also be part of those work plans. Then, for our future annual reports, once we get into the rhythm of going through this cycle, we'll be able to actually identify progress on the specific targets that have been identified. Then you will also have your document each year from the annual report as you take up other issues to have those data actually inform your thinking on the topic. I mentioned that the performance data included in the annual reports will provide you, hopefully, with a valuable tool as you think about these key policy decisions. In any given year, you're asked to take action on various key decisions. For instance, to ensure more financial and operational accountability, budget requests will be taken into consideration, the tuition differential proposals that we mentioned. Again, academic and enrollment proposals can be reviewed with attention to how the institutions are performing on certain metrics as well. You will remember that Governor McDevitt charged staff and university liaisons with trying to reduce some of the reporting and to consolidate it into a single annual report. On this particular slide, I referenced the statutory requirements we have tried to consolidate at this point in time. We are in communication with legislators and their staff about trying to align timelines so that we don't have to do things on a jagged schedule, but that we can hand things in all at one time. Again, Governor Perez mentioned this yesterday. The tuition differential report this first year was submitted prior to this meeting. Pending your approval, we hope to actually get on schedule so that that can just be consolidated into the report in future years. Please note also this year we talked about scheduling issues. We were on a really tight timeline. We knew that the university boards of trustees already had their schedules set for this year, and therefore not every board of trustees has been able to officially approve their component of the annual report, and so we will be requesting that you approve the full report pending those individual UBOT approvals in the coming meetings. Very early in the discussions, you indicated that you'd really like for us to design a performance monitoring system and the related reports to fulfill a lot of different purposes. And so we took that to heart, and we really have tried to design the report in such a way that individuals with different needs can access the data at a level that's meaningful and useful for the kinds of decisions that that particular individual has to make. So a legislator is going to have obviously different set of needs than legislative staff or board staff. You might have different needs than a trustee or a president or a data administrator at an institution. So even though we knew that some individuals would need to be able to access data at a very detailed level, we also tried to take this approach of developing the executive summaries, the dashboards, so that you could get a quick look at how we're progressing as a system and how individual institutions are progressing on key metrics. It's a little overwhelming in print format. We're looking forward to being able to try to move to an interactive web-based format, again designed so that individuals can access the information from the direction that makes sense for them and at the level of detail that they need that information. This year, as we put together the annual report on a very tight timeline, board staff tried to provide as much of the foundational data as we possibly could from the existing state university data system, and then we sent those data out to the institutions for review and for them to build the contextual narrative to help explain what the data meant for their given institution. We will continue forward with this process so that we take as much of the load off of institutional personnel on the front end as possible by actually pulling down data from either the state system or from national databases in which the data are already captured. In your packet is a copy of the state university system system-level dashboard. As you remember, at the request and guidance of particularly Governor Dasburg, we made sure that we set this up so that it aligned with your strategic planning goals regarding providing access and degree production, meeting the workforce needs of the state, building world-class academic programs and research capacity while defining and approving university missions, and meeting community needs and fulfilling unique institutional responsibilities. So we have designed the dashboard to match that approach. We can go to whatever level of detail you actually would like today regarding particular data. I'll point out just a few things. You know that a couple of the goals specifically focus in on talent development. And what we did on each of the dashboard indicators, just to give you a sense of how to get used to reading these, is we tried to pull up the data for the last 5 years for which data were available on any given metric, and usually we did 5 years ago in the most current year to give you a sense of change on any given metric. So for instance, if you look at baccalaureate degrees awarded and graduate degrees awarded, overall we actually awarded 70,625 degrees across the levels in 2008 and 9. A couple of points of note: of the 51,458 baccalaureates, 37% of those were awarded to transfer students from the Florida college system. At the baccalaureate level, there was about an 18.8% increase over the 5 years. At the graduate level, it was about 13.4% increase at the master's. And then we've begun to divide out the research doctorates and the professional doctorates with respective 24% and 34% increase. Also, you'll remember that we've made a strong commitment to monitoring degree production, not just access, but actual success through degree completion for students from traditionally underrepresented minority groups and low socioeconomic groups. In general, the speed of growth, although there was an increase in the actual degrees awarded to traditionally underrepresented students at the baccalaureate level, the speed of growth was below average for the black students and above average for the Hispanic students. The key point is that even given that growth, the proportion of our grads who come from these underrepresented groups is still below the proportion of their representation in the 18 to 44-year-old population of our state. You will remember the work that we've been doing on identifying areas of strategic emphasis. There were 6 different areas overall at the baccalaureate level. 57% of our degrees granted in 08-09 fell into one of those areas of strategic emphasis, and at the graduate level, 59% fell in an area of strategic emphasis. I know that there's been an increasing interest in the STEM area. 18.3% of all of our degrees at all levels were awarded in the STEM areas, the degree areas that were identified for the state. This is the slide on which I need to note an error. If you'll take your document, this was just a carry forward error with some text. On the academic and research development expenditures, the increase of federal R&D expenditures was actually 15%, and the total growth for all sources was 26% increase over the 5-year period. Now, you'll know that that's the most commonly used metric nationally, is actually talk in terms of the expenditures. So it was a total of $1.55 billion in 7-8. that represents, like I say, the 26% increase from a level 5 years ago. It's interesting to note that the SUS R&D expenditures have pretty consistently remained at about 4th in the nation for public higher educations. Now, when you actually look at the award side of things, collectively the state university system was awarded $1.43 billion in research grants in fiscal year 2008, 84% of which came from federal and private entities. And it's important to note that our faculty members continue to be above the national average for public institutions of higher education in productivity per faculty member. The universities use past research funding to generate 156 patents, 125 new licenses, and $56 million in license revenue. The other item that's on this slide is licensure pass rate on the NCLEX, the nursing exam, at 92.4%. Our staff are continuing to work with staff at the Division of Professional and Business and Professional Regulation to try to attain the kind of data we need for other professions so we can monitor our students' progress and on pass rates on various licensure examinations. You'll also remember that one of the goals that's not listed in these particular graphs was the individual institutional goals for meeting community needs and institutional specific missions. In the layout of the annual report, you'll see behind the system level information a similar report for each institution. I highly encourage you to take a look at the section on Goal 4. It provides some incredible information about the outstanding work that's being done at each one of our institutions to meet their individual institutional mission, specific community needs, community engagement activities, and awards and recognition at each one of our institutions. You asked us to take a look at a couple of extra measures on resources and efficiency. You remember that at the national level, when we talk about retention and graduation rates, we tend to get stuck on looking at 6-year graduation rates for full-time FTIC students, which is not totally helpful for us in the state university system because more than 50% of the students who graduate with baccalaureate from the state university system were either part-time students and or came in as transfers. And so that metric's not really giving us much information about our student population. So you'll begin to see information broken down in coming years so that we start paying attention to different subgroups of students and their progression. And then you'll see information there relative to the student-faculty ratios and funding per FTE student. Let me just point out that in Volume 2, which we did not copy for you, it includes the information about the 21st Century programs, the Centers of Excellence, the Commercialization Access Grants, as well as the detailed data, tables of data for the tuition differential, as well as these other metrics. And so if there's a need to dig into a particular item, that information is there. Let me pause at this point, Governor Martin, and let the committee consider adoption.
Are there any questions? It's been moved, and we have a second to approve the report, to send it forward. As Dr. Muneer mentioned, there are a few housekeeping items, a few edits that they will make in the final document. So along with that recommendation, we would like to have them, give them the flexibility to make whatever corrections they need in order to have the copy be error-proof as they submit it. Okay? All those in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, before Dottie leaves the podium, if I might, I can't tell you the amount of work that people have been putting into this, because this is still, as Dottie mentioned, there's still much work to do. And I can't tell you how appreciative I am of our staff with the Board of Governors, limited in number as they are, and really balancing so many balls in the air at any given time. But just like with Derry Harper, They know that there exist out there at our institutions some of the brightest and most talented people in America who have put their efforts into this from the institution side. Accountability systems are complicated things, and as you see, they can begin to grow in size based on what people think is important to measure and quantify. The idea here is to end up with one of the better accountability systems in the nation for our state university system, but at the same time, try not to overburden our institutions by counting everything and then not looking at some of it, but providing, as we've tried to do, different levels of metric. The dashboard indicators, which give people a general sense of where we are as a system and as institutions. But then for those who want it or need it, for strategic planning purposes at the institution level, at the Board of Governors level, legislative staff and members and others, a much deeper dive down into data that people want and need for various purposes. And we really have worked very hard with the people at the universities who, again, have done an outstanding job of trying to design what is already becoming an outstanding system, but based on what we still have to accomplish, can very soon go on to be one of the better systems in the country. And at the end of the day, will provide people, I think, what they really need to do the massive job that they have to do and help us better organize the system, keep track of our efforts, and make sure that the injection of funding is bearing the most fruit, make sure that we are as efficient and effective as we really have to be. And in working with this, I hope you will see not only the amount of work that's been done, but the quality program that really is emerging. Working with the House and Senate staff and members, I can tell you they are very enthusiastic about this. They see this as helping to create, as a state, a vehicle that really will give us the ability to better organize ourselves, and then hopefully on the legislative side see where injections of funding might best be placed to truly see enhancements created over time, and the ability to track those enhancements to make certain, again, that they are bearing the most fruit. So while there's still a lot of work to do on this, and it will still be inclusive in terms of who they are helping us to build this, and that does and has included House staff, Senate staff, Governor's staff. We want them to have ownership of this system because we don't want to hand them an accountability system and simply say, here it is. If there are metrics that they're interested in, if there are ideas that they want to infuse into this, it should belong to all of us because it, at the end of the day, will be used by all of us for all the right reasons. The last comment I'd like to make is comparative purposes. Folks, comparing Florida Atlantic University to the University of Florida is easy in some things, very difficult in others. And you can take any of the 11 universities and match them up that way. Those are the two that come to mind. What we're trying to create here is an opportunity and a responsibility for each university to set in place its metrics, its targets, its goals, its objectives, and then measure that university against that university. It is important, as we now have, to have a national peer group that we can look to see how they're doing in a lot of these metrics. It's always good to gauge how you're doing against people who look like you and are similar to you. And it's also good to have aspirational peers. There's nothing wrong with Florida Atlantic University looking at the University of Florida, not only at their metrics, but also to find out how they got their metrics to look that way, and sharing ideas, best practices, the idea of greater efficiency and sharing best practice. But the idea is not to lay one university up against another and compare metrics. The idea is to challenge each university to be better next year than it was the year before, and then work as a system to help them accomplish that very important mission. So I appreciate you giving me that opportunity, but I'm speaking not just on my behalf, but on behalf of, I think, of a lot of people who have put great blood, sweat, and tears into this process. And at the end of the day, if it's used for the wrong reasons, and of course we don't control how people use information, but we beg that people realize that it's offered up for all the right reasons. and that is a much more strategic approach to what our great institutions are doing and really creating a systemized approach to the state universities of Florida for the future. So I really appreciate you allowing me to do that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
In your accolade, you expressed thanks to the staff members for the hard work that they had put into this. I want to second that, but in addition, as a member of this committee and a member of this board, follow up on what the Chancellor just said, maybe repeating some of that, but in fewer words. The comment I want to make is to the quality of the product. This is really a first-rate document. Very useful. The information is easily accessible. I'm sure will be found to be useful by presidents and their staffs, by members of the legislature, by everybody that the Chancellor has mentioned. I think they have done, as you said, a lot of hard work has gone into it, but the final product is one that we can all be proud of, and I thank and congratulate all the members of the staff for having done that.
Thank you, everyone, for those kind words. This is obviously a document that I think we as a system can really be proud of. And it's everyone collectively working together, from the staffs of the various universities, the provosts, the presidents, and the Board of Governors and the Board of Trustees. Everybody has had a part in making this a success. One last question for Dr. Manier. What is the timeline for finalizing the document and getting it to the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate?
Today is 20th. We are shooting for February 1st.
February 1st?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I with a couple of changes, I think that that's still possible as far as if we can get the printing done. Printing would be the only delay.
Then why are you standing there?
Thanks again for all your hard work. Okay, now moving on to item number 5, ensuring and enhancing university efficiencies throughout ongoing reviews. The efficiency use of resources has been an ongoing priority for the state university system. Universities are encouraged to delineate some of their recent efficiency efforts in the 2009 annual report. Chair McDivitt and Chancellor Brogan have expressed a desire for this committee to spend a little time discussing how we can ensure that universities continue to utilize many of the excellent processes that they have put into place during the most recent difficult fiscal times, even through based on the budgetary circumstances that they currently have, and how we can improve. We would like to have Governor Duncan, who has been championing this effort for the last several years, and Chancellor Brogan to facilitate the next discussion, talking about enhancing the university's efficiency program. Governor Duncan.
Chair. I think actually champion does sound better than broken record. So thank you. I think all of you know I feel very passionately about the great things that are happening at all of our institutions, and just the work and the dialogue and the engagement between the trustees and each of the institutions, and the efficiencies that we're seeing are really pretty amazing. And as you look at about the efficiency, and we had a little discussion yesterday about this during the budget committee, I think the point is that this really can't just be about budget cutting and a reactionary thing. It really, to get the bang for the buck that we want, and to have the ultimate amount of resources dedicated to the core missions that we just discussed in this report, is really what we're trying to do. And while we're confident that the efficiencies are strong, and President Hitt had an amazing statement yesterday that I guess Florida ranked #1 in efficiency as a system for higher education. So I mean, we're good, but I think there's still opportunity to get better. And we want to, and I'm also proud TaxWatch is an organization that's been working with the legislature on a bunch of reports and ideas for efficiency, and the system, our institutions are named a number of times through there as having leading ideas that they want to see adapted to other agencies and to other parts of state government. But, all that said, I think the point of this dialogue that the chair and chancellor want us to have was, how do we make this more routine? How do we really take all of the data, all of the good ideas, and translate it into knowledge that can be leveraged by institutions as appropriate? We're really not talking one size fits all, but I think there is also some further efficiencies that beyond the individual things happening in institutions that can be happening if we work a little better as a system or as collective institutions within the system. And I think as we look through these things, and I don't know, Frank, if you want to go through some of the different ideas and the options, but really to make this a routine part of our culture, I think is what we're talking about. And it's important to the foundation and the New Florida Initiative and a number of the other things that I think will help us achieve all of our goals.
Yes, thank you, Governor. And some of this will be redundant for those of you who were here yesterday when we had some of this conversation, but I used the word institutionalized yesterday regarding what we're talking about. Searching for efficiencies is not new for people at universities, either because they just do that as a natural course oftentimes, or if you look at the last 3 years, because they have been forced to ratchet that effort up simply to meet the enormous budget reductions that we've been facing as a system. Unfortunately, I don't think the system has gotten a great deal of credit for those efficiency fines as we've reduced budgets, because people simply look at them as budget cuts, but budgets don't cut themselves. People have to find ways to do things differently with less, in my humble opinion, and with an equal or better result. That's the definition of efficiency. And so at the end of the day, what we're talking about is taking something that already happens at our university, that is the constant search for efficiency, and try to better institutionalize it so people who need to will better understand what we do at the university level and how we react to the search for efficiency as a system. And so we yesterday were talking about working with our universities to create an annualized efficiency opportunity to better chronicle what our universities do during the course of the year to look for, and if they find them, implement efficiency measures, and be able to coordinate and organize that in a way that it will be useful not only for us as a system, best practice clearly comes to mind, but also the opportunity to make certain that people in the legislature and elsewhere understand that we don't just react to budget cuts. We always are on the search for better ways to build a mousetrap and more efficient opportunities. If you go through some of the efficiency measures, and I'm going to use that term, that universities have been engaged in just over the last 3 years, whether they gave them the ability, necessary ability to cut their budget or however you look at it, it's remarkable what some of those measures look like. The presidents who are here today could each one probably chronicle a laundry list of things that they have overseen at their universities and worked with their boards of trustees and their faculty, staff, and students to do more with less. So the idea is to institutionalize this. This is something, as the chairwoman mentioned, she's been working on, and this board has been working on now for quite some time. And it isn't just to get applause from people to say, aren't they great, they do efficiency. It is to, again, organize what we already do, chronicle what we do, both for best practice opportunities and for reporting purposes, to help people understand that whenever you, and then we as a system, find an opportunity, we take it to become a more efficient and productive system at the end of the day. So real fast, I will tell you, because I just came from there, but this won't be new to any of our presidents, the opportunity to look, for example, every year at our programs, our academic programs, to look at the viability of those programs every year, not just when times are difficult fiscally, but every year, to review academic programs and make certain that if there are programs that are no longer productive, that they be exorcised from the institution. If there are programs that need to be changed to become more productive, that they be changed. But once people know and understand that that is being institutionalized, people should constantly be on the look for how they can organize their academic programs to assure the greatest efficiency in place. So at Florida Atlantic University, for example, John Pritchett is here, so correct me, John, if I'm wrong, but we did a viability study, and at the end of the day, if I'm not mistaken by recall, we actually eliminated some 30 academic degree track programs because we examined them carefully. And even the people who were involved in those programs believed that some had just become arcane and were completely either undersubscribed or had no one in them on some counts, or others, another group, that needed to be put on notice that we needed to work on those to create greater efficiency and productivity at the end of the day. Every university did that at some point in the last several years. Some universities do it by regular course of activity. But we need to better organize that and make certain people understand that we do those kinds of things. One of the things I was most taken with when I came to the state university system, remembering that my previous background had been K through 12 education, was the number of activities at a university that were handled through contract rather than the traditional method used predominantly in K through 12 education, where everybody who works for that institution is a state employee. I was really quite taken with the fact that universities have been outsourcing maintenance programs, food service programs, custodial services, groundskeeping, a whole litany of opportunities to outsource and contract, looking for greater efficiency and the opportunity to save money and plow that back into academic programs. That was it's almost a regular course of action that I don't think most people know exists in our state university system. So again, I won't belabor it anymore other than to say this is not new. What is new, and what the chairwoman and the Board of Governors have been working on with the universities, is trying to better organize it, better institutionalize it, and make certain that it is a regular course of what we do as a system of state universities in Florida.
And I guess really, I think the point of this agenda item now is to have more dialogue about, how do we best institutionalize this? Do we adopt a regulation? Do we, kind of where's the direction, the feedback? Do you like where we're headed with this? There's a number of different topics that, we can focus on. I think, the strong goal is to not duplicate efforts and to use the annual report and not create kind of a separate accountability measurement system, to leverage practice what we preach, leverage what we've got and use that effectively to help do this. But I guess we would love some more feedback from.
And to tee that up, I will say we're not looking to create yet another burden for universities. This is clearly, I hope, an opportunity to again better chronicle and organize what's already going on out there and take advantage of what's going on out there, both for purposes of sharing it with other institutions, but also for purposes of annually reporting to whoever the powers that be are. Your local boards of trustees can see what all universities are up to by way of efficiency. The Board of Governors can see that, as well as members of the House and Senate, the governor's office. People need to see it and need to know it. As the chairwoman mentioned, probably the appropriate vehicle to use would be the accountability system we're already putting into place, and be able to, without, again, overburdening you, have some simple system that we could put in place so that there is an annual gathering of what's going on out there for purposes of organization. Is that a reasonable summation? So with that, what we want you to know is no decision has been made in that regard, but that's what we'd like to end up with at the end of the day. How we get there is what we want to have the conversation about.
Any comments from the university presidents? Feel free to chime in.
Don't all speak at once.
General comment is you're doing a great job. We need to comment whether this is something that I've also been interested in for many years. And there's a lot of progress.
And Madam Chair, if it is acceptable to you, then we'll just keep working with the institutions to try to continue the dialogue to determine how we move forward with this, and keep the board, obviously, and you in the loop as to how that is going over time.
Great. Yes.
I have to go back again to purchasing, because that is a great way to save a lot of money. And you never know why things are done until you look into it. And I went to work for a mattress company in Ohio, and I was told to kind of straighten out their purchasing department. Well, I first one found out that they were paying 5 to 7 cents a gallon more for gasoline than you could do it at the corner gas station. So I called in a number of gasoline companies, Shell, Chevron, and so on, and was able to negotiate a price 5 to 6 or 7 cents less than you paid at the corner gas station. I got called into the president's office, and he said, "What did you do?" I said, "Well, I just saved 10, 12 cents a gallon." He said, "You just fired my father's best friend." So the president had a father who had a friend who was selling gasoline to this company at a higher price. And I'm just saying that there are ways in purchasing to save an awful lot of money, and working together at the universities can really help us.
Thank you. And you have mentioned that before, and we actually had a call, Tim Jones, and we have the purchasing officers basically for the institutions talking collectively together and working on that, and we concur 100% that that's an area with great opportunity.
We talked yesterday, Madam Chair, different issue, but clearly related, about student health insurance, and the fact that out there between the Florida college system and the state university system, you have over 1 million students, and the potential of going to the street with an RFP, an ITN, something, to see if there are companies out there who might like to have a shot at over 1 million students, and perhaps creating the power of a giant consortium that might be able to, if we're successful, see us come back with a policy that people could offer at the lowest possible premium. We won't know if unless we try. We may not. The companies, for whatever reason, might not be able to give us what we want. But at the end of the day, there sits 11 large universities, over 300,000 students, 28 in the Florida college system with over 800,000. One would have to believe that at least there's an opportunity here to pull together the power of that sort of potential and see if we can find an efficiency on behalf of our students in that regard. So that is another illustration, I think. And again, don't know where it'll go, but I do know where it'll go if we don't try.
And I'm remiss, I forgot to recognize Rick Walsh. He's been my co-chair on this, and his corporate expertise and wisdom has been great with helping kind of balance the dialogue with a chair of the trustees, from the Board of Governors perspective, and we really it's been great, and value that, and look forward to that continued participation and just expanding it.
Governor Stavros' comment on purchasing and flipping through the annual reports, I noticed that in the University of Florida report they have a new product called e-procurement product, MyUF market, that all the units are required to use, and that might be something that the other universities would benefit from having. So, and I don't know if others would pick up on this, because I don't know if they're going to take the time to read through all these reports from the other institutions, but maybe one thing that could be done is to kind of go through these reports and pick out some promising practices, and just produce a list that could be sent to others to say, here's some promising practices at certain universities. And then,
good point.
Well, by the way, when I mentioned saving 10 or 12 cents a gallon, gasoline at that time was 80 cents. So it was 10% plus saving. So believe me, this is a big policy that I see.
And got your tire pressure checked, your oil changed, and your windshield wiper washed at the same time.
Good. Any, Mr. Chair?
Very good discussion, very good dialogue, and thank you for recognizing Rick Walsh, because I was going to comment on that as well. But it's good that you recognize that this is a collaborative effort between the Board of Governors and the Board of Trustees working together to identify shared services and ways that we can improve the overall system. Okay. Thank you. Now, moving on to item number 6, discussion regarding the university work plans. And we've laid a good foundation in regards to the annual reports. This is like the next phase or the next step as we go through this process. So over the next 4 to 5 months, we would then turn our attention to the next phase in the planning and performance accountability cycle. As was discussed in yesterday's budget committee, institutions will be submitting any tuition differential proposals for the upcoming year. We will also need to take a look at enrollment plans. You will remember that it was our intention to roll these proposals into the university work plans. The work plans will also provide a venue for universities to outline their vision for the next 5 to 10 years, identify new programs they hope to implement, focus more specifically on some institution-specific goals for the next 1 to 2 years, and identify each university's projected contribution to the system-wide strategic goals that we've identified in the dashboard. Our hope is to set aside a good portion of time at the June meeting for an extended workshop on the university work plans. We want to provide universities with the opportunity to respond to some of the guiding questions that will help us as members of the Board of Governors to better understand the core strengths, the areas of focus, and primary goals for each institution. Dr. Rainier and I will continue to work with the provost to plan for this workshop. I've had the opportunity to meet recently with the Council of Academic Vice Presidents to discuss how we best proceed in identifying institutional targets for the university system metrics. I want to thank the provost for their thoughtful participation. We learned a lot about these types of planning and goal setting that are taking place at the university level. All of the universities and their boards of trustees are engaged in varying levels of analysis to determine appropriate targets based upon student populations served and the mission of the individual institutions and the resources that they are being considered. I would like to recommend to the committee, particularly during the first year, that we take advantage of all the good work they've already done at the university levels, and we ask the institutions to recommend to us targets for these measures. The university liaisons can work with staff to explain the factors that go into identifying each particular target. And I would have to say that during the conference call, there was quite a bit of discussion as to how should we address the targets. Should it be a top-down or a bottom-up process? I felt very strongly that we should allow universities to identify what those targets are for the first year. You all have been very close to the process. We would like to see what your ideas are in terms of targets. There's also a discussion, well, why not let the universities do it every year? Again, as a collaborative process, we would like for you to do it the first year, and it may, in fact, be a process where you will identify them ongoing. But at least for the first year, we would like to hear from you. And we also had several members of the committee that wanted to identify targets for the Board of Governors as well, in terms of an effectiveness measure for us, in terms of our role. I thought that was a very interesting dialogue. But the point is that we would like for the universities to identify what those targets are, continue to work with staff, and the June meeting will be a very, very critical meeting as we begin to lay out the process and continue this planning procedure. Dr. Rainier, any additional comments? Okay. Any questions?
I want to make sure, as we're going through this, just on a very high level, big picture kind of thing, that, say, theoretically speaking, if we were going to take on like a 500-acre parcel of land that would fit into the system, that this kind of thing, as we move forward, will make that not a surprise to anybody and not something we read about in clips. I mean, it kind of fits in at the very highest level to setting the vision and the goal for the institutions. Is that?
Yes. As we move forward, there are a number of things that staff we'll be working on. And one is identifying things like that so that we, as board members, are not surprised that there will be a very well thought out process so that we all will be better informed.
What,
I just want to point out, if we're going to do university work plans at the June meeting in a workshop, and we're going to be doing tuition differential metrics at a workshop at the June meeting, we better plan for 3 days.
Yeah, those are two whoppers. I was just going to say to the governor's point, that is part of the intended outcome here, is a much better organization of the future of the system by institution and by system. The ability to work with each university to help lay out a vision and a plan for that university's continued growth and development and evolution, to make certain that everybody is on the page as to where that institution is headed in the future, because it is not only important as an individual institution, it's part of a system. And so we should have a much deeper relationship with our universities going forward, and the best way to do that is to be intimately involved in their strategic plans, and hopefully the new system of accountability will become a great jump-off point for their continued strategic planning efforts at the university, so that we're all looking in those strategic plans for the same kind of outcomes, but also have a much deeper and richer understanding of how these universities will continue to grow and change and evolve. The University of Florida is a perfect example. The question is, how much more can it grow? It isn't a question of growth, in my opinion, Dr. Manchin. At the University of Florida, it's continued evolution. How is it going to change in the future to continue to meet the needs of students, but also to continue to evolve and change as an institution, to always be right for the time in which it finds itself? And then that's not only obviously important to the University of Florida, it's important to the system of universities in Florida to make sure that what they're doing works in harmony with what is happening at Florida Gulf Coast University or Florida A&M University, that this makes sense at the end of the day and is not just 11 random acts of excellence. And so that's the idea, and that's the methodology behind it, is to not create a regimented approach to this, but an organized approach to this that will benefit not only the institutions but the entire system.
In addressing the comment regarding the June meeting and making sure we have enough time to deal with and discuss the work plans and everything, I guess one of the concerns I've had since I've been on the board is the fact that we may not have enough time to have the discussion and the dialogue that we need to on a lot of our key issues that we're facing. So as we begin to plan for that June meeting, there may be a need to have an extended period of time in order to have that type of dialogue. So as staff identifies the appropriate dates for those meetings, we may need to clear our schedules and have a little bit more time, because I think we're getting into a very, very critical phase now, and to have the desired end results that we want, I would be willing to make sure that we have that time. Thank you. Governor Tripp.
One of the things that would be helpful to me and maybe to others is that staff developed an outline and that we had something specifically in front of us of what we're going to come and talk about, and that was shared with the Board of Trustees and the universities and the presidents and the people who are interested, so that we see what we're going to focus on, and when we come in, you know, instead of it being, we ought to be doing this, we ought to be doing this, here's what we're going to talk about, and everybody can come with, you know, they're either for or against it, or they're ready to give us good information.
In a recent meeting that I had with Dr. Manier, we actually talked about that, laying out, you know, a schedule, a timeline, so we would know for the next 6-9 months what are the critical things that we as a board need to discuss within at least my committee. But I think as overall board, if we had some type of visual that would identify all of the major decision points and things we need to address, we all would have a better idea of the things we need to accomplish.
Yes, sir. And to that end, we've been working on just that. our office trying to better organize the kinds of important issues that this board and the universities need to be about in the course of the next year. Governor Perez just makes a great point. I mean, you can't do everything all at the same time. You've got to lay out what's important to do and provide ample time to do it and do it well, and then move on. So we are right now working on a work plan of our own that will take some of these very important issues and try to lay out a timeline as to when we'll be dedicating time and energy with the universities to those particular issues. And there, as you might imagine, there's a long list of them. So I would suspect Rome will not be built in a day on this, but this is the work we're all supposed to be about. But your point is very valid, Mr. Chairman, and that is we have a responsibility to lay it out in such a way where everyone knows what we're going to be taking up, when we're going to be dealing with it, so that they have an opportunity, as Governor Tripp mentioned, to come prepared to deal with that subject. And we're going to be sharing that and working with the universities on that, so everyone will have a very clear idea as to what they can expect to be dealing with at what given time.
And I don't want to beat this horse. We've had the conversation. I guess the question is, 2 substantive, lengthy workshops in the June meeting. I know you have an overabundance of staff who each have one singular task, and that's all they focus on. So that's a good thing.
I'm fortunate that way.
Are we going to? Is staff able to deal with that agenda, or are we going to overburden?
We're going to have to look at that. I don't have an answer for you right now, Governor, but we're going to have to look at that. If we can't organize this in a way where we can do them both justice, then we may have to recommend a change in that regard. Because just those 2 issues. Differential, especially this year because it's the first time through.
And I know that's going to eat a lot of staff time, and we're going to want it to eat a lot of staff time, so I just want to be sure we're...
Okay. Any other questions, comments? If not, we'll call for the adjournment.
And I will reinsert myself on schedule. It is now, by my watch, 11:15, so we're actually done a little bit early, believe it or not, naturally. So, Dr. Hitt, you want to tell us about your grandkids? Doing well? Here's what we're going to do. One is 6'5". Must have been a difficult birth. I'm going to recommend we take a break. My understanding, and I'll turn and see if anybody confirms this, is that lunch will be ready at 11 o'clock. So break first. Lunch is ready. We will go ahead and take a break. I would recommend that it's 11:15. I would recommend that we reconvene by noon. That would give us an hour and a half prior to the governor's arrival, although, as I mentioned, somewhere prior to his arrival, we will be taking another break so that we can do some reconfiguration of the room prior to his comments. So thank you very much for your flexibility, and we'll look to reconvene here, Madam Chair, with your approval, at about 11:45. How's that? About 11:45. Thank you all.
Well done, Frank.